Well, hello there. My name is Jocelyn. You may call me Joy, and yes, I've cut my hair. So, I wish to talk about a group of protesters specifically by more about their tactics than their goals themselves. So, this is a climate activist group network known as Just Stop Oil, which has made a number of high profile protests recently, some of which you may have heard of, but exactly how effective these have been is the thing I really want to mention here. And should just stop oil just stop? Before I go into answering that question, thanks to an article in Indie 100, I have a list of the protests that have made the news, and I want to run through those quickly with you. The Van Gogh painting. This one was the first one I heard about. Two members of the activist group went to London's National Gallery and threw cans of tomato soup at the painting of Sunflowers by Vincent van Gogh, defacing the painting, and proceeded to glue themselves to the wall next to it. Two other activists scaled the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge in London at the Dartford crossing, leading to traffic being closed for 42 hours. The protesters were eventually brought down by a cherry picker. The shop Harrods had its exterior sprayed with orange paint, whilst other protesters glued themselves to the ground. You'll see the theme orange paint and glue is very prevalent here. 55 Tufton Street. This is an address which is a home to a controversial climate denial group, as well as other right-wing think tanks. And again, the exterior of the building was covered with orange paint. Two London showrooms belonging to Ferrari and Bentley were sprayed with orange paint. Two people were arrested there. 4 protesters smeared chocolate cake over the waxwork of King Charles III at the Madame Tussauds attraction. More protesters blocked traffic at the Abbey Road crossing, which is famous for being shown in the Beatles album cover, which obstructed traffic. 25 people glued themselves to the road at the Mall, which is close to Buckingham Palace. The New Scotland Yard sign at London's Metropolitan Police was sprayed with orange paint. Another key junction between High Holborn and Kingsway in London was blocked by protesters just sitting in the middle of the road. Perhaps they'd run out of glue at that point. I shouldn't joke about that. At Downing Street, some people tried to climb the gates, but they failed to do so. So again, out came the glue, and people glued themselves outside and on the road, outside the entrance to the gates. The M25 motorway was also a target. People climbed onto motorway gantries, which forced road closures in both directions, which for anyone who knows anything about the M25, it is the main motorway that leads in and out of London. And most recently, the one I heard about was at the Crucible, the World Snooker Championship. I was actually working at the time this was happening. So, and because I work in a pub that shows sports, I literally saw people's reactions to this. Basically what happened is 2 people jumped onto the tables, the snooker tables. One of them sprayed orange poster paint, powder around, and the other one tried to glue herself to the other table. Now, I'm not even going to try and pretend that their cause is anything other than just and noble. The use of fossil fuels will undeniably, certainly, strangle all life on Earth, polluting the environment, and raise the global temperatures as it has been for the past 150 years or so. There is sufficient, more than sufficient evidence to prove that this is correct. This is happening and needs to stop. About 50 years ago, really, but, now's a better time than never. I just want to point out that debating the validity of these claims is just a pretense. This is serious, and it will seriously affect everyone and everything on this planet if we do not stop using fossil fuels. But the question is, do the potential ends justify these protesters' means? Or peaceful protests are often cited as the ideal, but they are also very often ineffective, since authoritarian governments tend to ignore and or remove protesters, some of them using stronger force than others. Grabbing the attention of the public and politicians is a necessary step in getting the message out, i.e., that from the perspective of the protesters, we are mad as hell and we are not going to stop until you stop with the fossil fuels, with the oil. These protests, at least in my view, range varyingly in appropriateness. So let's start by looking at the Van Gogh and the snooker championship protests. These were very, very high profile, but I think they were just the wrong targets. Especially with the sunflowers painting, this was criminal damage done to priceless art. People like art. You attack art, you're going to get people not liking you. Van Gogh, as far as I know, had nothing pro-oil in his in his work or in his viewpoint. The painting itself wasn't depicting anything pro-oil. It was depicting sunflowers, which is very much in line with keeping nature alive. There's nothing structurally inherent about art or museums associated with big oil. So I just feel like it was the wrong target. Similarly with the snooker championship, although yes, the tables were not criminally damaged by the paint, and the delay was only 40 minutes. But still, a lot of people were very inconvenienced, and they will focus more on the inconvenience than they will about the message. Again, it's the wrong target. Snooker, or sports in general, really don't have that much to do with big oil companies polluting or governments giving concessions to said oil companies. The Tufton Street protest, on the other hand, I think is an example of hitting the right target. As stated before, this is the address of a group that actively denies climate science. So yes, this is the correct target, and it's not a coincidence that it's also the hub of right-wing think tanks as well. This protest, as far as I can tell, was um, something of a minor inconvenience. There was no permanent damage done to any property. There was no one physically hurt, which I would argue is a good thing. But because of the minor nature of this protest, I don't think it was perhaps strong enough. And it's easy for those people in that proverbial glass house to ignore. Yes, they can prosecute and press charges and things like that, but they're still going to do the same things that they've been doing previously. This isn't enough to scare them off. And then as for the QET Bridge and other road obstruction protests, people could have died. I don't know, but somebody may have actually died. Urgent traffic flow was stopped. That means that ambulances, police, or fire brigades, or any drivers with sick people inside, like, were not just minor inconvenienced. They would literally have had their lives threatened by this. And I do understand the link here that traffic, cars, vehicles run on petrol, and petrol, derived from oil. Like, I get there's a link there, and people will die with too much CO2 in the atmosphere anyway. Like, I understand that logic, but I will raise the point that you cannot save humanity by hurting humans. Such protests as these have so far failed to achieve the desired outcome. As far as I know, government policy towards fossil fuels hasn't changed. The disruptive nature of these protests, at best, grabs attention momentarily from media sites and, the public in general, which, hey, if there was no attention grabbed at all, I wouldn't be speaking about it now. So, okay, that's a thing. But at worst, these protests direct the public's ire and distaste towards the protesters themselves, and again, not towards the government or the oil companies, which is the ultimate goal of the protests. It's sad to say, but likability does affect the messaging. Logically, I know this is a bit of a genetic fallacy. Judging the message on the messenger doesn't make the message any more or less valid. But humans are not always rational. I mean, if we were, the establishment of companies that pollute for profit would probably never have happened in the first place. Think about a debate where you have a charismatic orator versus someone who is technically more correct but also preachy or boring or dislikable. The more charismatic one will win in that debate scenario, at least in the eyes of the audience. So what is to be done then? I mean, I would advise that any Just Stop Oil activists choose their targets wisely and appropriately, like with 55 Tufton Street. Like, go after those people that are making life actively worse in this way. Throwing food at priceless art isn't even close to being the correct target. Being likable attracts others to your side way easier than pissing them off will. Again, I'm bringing up the art. People like art. The people who through the tomato soup at the painting look like the aggressors. Optically, it's terrible. It just won't engender any feelings of sympathy to the cause or to the people fighting for this, again, really worthwhile cause. I would recommend the continuation of non-violence. Again, you can't save humanity by hurting humans. But also you get to maintain that image of having the moral high ground. As such, I'm going to say that yes, I do agree with Just Stop Oil in their goal, and I would absolutely not want them to stop protesting, but I really want them to do things differently. Some things, anyway. And I do understand that it is a very difficult balancing act to try and achieve all of these things at once. I also understand that it is incredibly easy for me to pass out judgments from the safety of my flat and the comfort of my armchair. Nevertheless, I do think it is a cause that is worthwhile supporting. So, at the very least, I may not donate my time to this particular network, this particular organization, but I will continue to not drive a car and only use public transport and try and buy the least amount of plastic stuff that I can, because oh my god, plastic packaging is just everywhere and it is too much. So yeah, let me know if you think I have forgotten anything in this whole topic, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. Non-binary is valid, goddammit.